What's up, everybody, and welcome back to a podcast, just a conversation with me, Jonathan Stockstill. So great to have you and my friend, Jon Torres.
What's
up,
going
dude?
on? How's it going?
Oh, man, it is going so good. So glad to have you on the show today. Today, we're going to be talking about worship. Man, one of my favorite subjects in the world. You're a worship leader, and so I felt like it would be just great to just talk about worship. And you know, when I was just starting out in ministry, worship was kind of my gateway. From the time I was 12 years old, I started playing keyboard in youth church. And I'd never thought about singing. I always thought I'd just be a keyboard player. And then I was 14 years old, and I wrote a song. And the name of the song was Drop Your Rock. That was the very first song that I ever wrote. And somebody asked me to sing it in church. And so that began the journey of singing and playing. But Jon, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your worship leading. When did you start leading worship? How did you pick up a guitar? How did you start the whole process?
Well, I kind of want to hear the song, the rock song. Do you still have it?
I do still have it. I mean, let's see. So I got a little guitar here, and this
You
is
remember
actually
it?
I do remember. Yeah, but this is very embarrassing. There's no question that this is a horrible song. So just full disclaimer. It was based on when Jesus saved the woman's life who was caught in adultery. And it goes like this. Jesus was walking along his merry way. He came across the Pharisees. It has something to say. They said we found... They said we found a woman who seemed to be in sin. They said we found her sleeping with all these different men. Slowly he stooped down and started writing in the sand. He wrote, I'd like to meet the perfect man. One by one they dropped their rock and slowly walked away. He said, I don't condemn you, and neither did they. Drop your rock, hold no bitterness. Drop your rock, you ain't sinless. Drop your rock, hold no bitterness. Things will be better if you would just drop your rock. Something like that.
Wow,
So,
come on, man.
Yeah.
Amazing. I like it.
yeah, so
At 14, that was the
14
subject.
years old, man. And why that story? I think the youth pastor had preached on that.
Yeah.
And so I just started trying to think of how I could support the message. And
Wow.
yeah, that wasn't the first song I wrote. I wrote a song when I was 8 about the stars and Jesus making the stars and stuff. But yeah, so that began the journey, man.
I love the song. Great
Yeah.
song. Well, a little bit about me is I work a part of the team here, and I actually started leading worship on accident. I found a guitar when I was probably 5th grade and was learning before I met Christ. And then I came to the youth group one day, and we still had transparencies you would put on the screen, and someone had led music at this youth group, and I just said, hey, this seems cool. Like, can I just practice in the corner while you guys are doing this? I'm trying to figure out how to play guitar. And then they said, yeah, you totally can. And I showed up to practice, and they made me sing a song, and they've never heard me sing. And so it was
you
a
were
whole
10?
accident. I was 11.
Okay.
I was 11.
Had your voice changed yet?
It was in the middle, the awkward zone, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. The very first time I sang in church, no kidding, I sang a song, and of course my friends all attended the youth ministry. And when I started to sing, they all started laughing in the back of the room, and they stood up. They were laughing so hard they walked out the room.
Oh,
And I had to
man.
keep singing with all my friends laughing. And that was the night I had to make up in my mind,
Come on.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't care what people think.
How old were you?
That was it. I was 14. So my voice was still changing, and I'll never forget them walking out and the feeling of like, am I really going to do this? And, people ask me all the time, like, man, when did you start singing? Like, have you always been a singer? I'm like, I've never thought of myself as a singer. All I think about when people think I'm a singer is people walking out the back of the room laughing. So I just think that I'm still that guy who's gotten better and refined the craft. But yeah.
Definitely have gotten better for sure. So would you say that that's the funniest moment you've had leading worship? Has there been anything
Oh
anything
gosh,
that
man.
sticks out is
Oh
like, man,
gosh, there's been so
this.
many. But you know the website or at least the YouTube channel Worship Fails, and people
Right.
see the Instagram videos and stuff. I've lived all of those, so you know it's hard to pick a funniest moment. I've had keyboard collapses. You know,
Oh yeah.
so I used to play two keyboards. I had one that was the bass guitar and one that was the piano on top because we didn't have a bass player. So I would set the bottom keyboard to a bass sound and I would set the tops to a piano sound. And bro, I was heavy-handed, so I would just bang. I mean, just bang on the keys. And it was a two-tiered stand, and it collapsed on me in the middle of worship. And so the notes on the top hit the notes on the bottom. So it was just all these noises, and it was in the middle of a soft worship moment. So you know, you don't recover from that.
No, you don't.
You know,
You just transition. What
I've
happened?
fallen on my rear end. Like I mentioned it earlier in another podcast, but I fell on my tail, man. I was trying to sit down and pull the bench up behind me, and I missed it, and I fell on my backside. So, but actually, one of the funniest moments I've ever had is I had a woman who wanted to play the shofar. And you know that you're in a spiritual church if somebody
No
breaks
doubt.
off
It's a spirit-filled church.
breaks out a shofar. But they broke out a shofar and they started playing, and they played so hard that they passed out. And so they passed out and fell down the stairs. And that was one of the funniest
Legendary.
moments. Oh my God.
Legendary moment.
So legendary. So, but man, I love worship, and worship is in my heart so deep, and because I love God, and I love to sing to Him. I love to worship Him. So I'm a personal worshiper. I love to worship in my car. I love to worship when I'm by myself. I love to worship Him when I'm with people.
Yeah.
I think that worship keeps people humble.
It's true.
I think that if you're not a worshiper and you're a Christian, it may be a pride thing because you don't understand how bad you need God and what happens, the transaction or the exchange, I should say, that happens during worship. And so I'm so passionate about the subject of worship, and I'm even more passionate about talking about corporate worship,
Right.
and how important corporate worship is, the theology of it, the doctrine of it, the style of it, just the whole thing. So maybe we could spend a little bit of time talking about that. You know,
Absolutely.
as a worship leader, let me ask you something. What's the number one thing you would encourage young worship leaders in? If there's a 17-year-old listening right now that's a worship leader, what would you tell them that you've learned through years and years of leading worship?
I think it's a great question. I think for me, I remember leading worship back in the time when live recordings were on CDs, and you could see the whole DVD of like the whole live recording, and just this idea of one day I'm going to get to be a part of being on a DVD, and it was all about what it would look like. And I think as a young worship leader, I was thinking about, what do I look like to people? What do people think? When really, I think the biggest thing a worship leader needs to know is, what's your personal time like? Like, does your personal expression of worship to God outweigh your platform expression? I think you're in trouble anytime that starts to come out of balance, when like you worship way more on a platform than you ever do privately. And that's really been a game changer for me. What would you say for you?
If I were talking to young worship leaders, if I could talk to myself back when I was a 16, 17-year-old kid, it would be that people don't care about what you think they care about.
Yeah.
And I spent so much time trying to get the song just right, trying to
Musically
get the
and
sound just right, the band tuned just right, the arrangement just right. And, you know, the longer I've served the Lord and been with His people, people just want to have something they can sing to, something they can rejoice to, something they can be glad to participate in. And so it's really not about you.
Yeah,
That's the main thing, is it's not about you.
it's true.
And I think most worship leaders are thinking about themselves. What does my hair look like? How cool am I? What's my body movements? How cool are those body movements?
Yeah.
But really, it's literally not about you at
Right.
all. It's about God's people and God.
Yeah.
And so the more you can think, how can I set them up to connect with God in a deep
So
way?
good.
Just, you know, how can I pick a song that they can all sing? How
Right.
can I pick a key that they can all sing in? How can I get out of the way so they can meet with God?
That's good.
And I do realize this too. People are hungry for God. They really want to
Yeah.
meet with the Lord. They really want to be touched by God. And so if I can help lead people in those type moments, that is the most important thing. So I wouldn't say that it's like obviously anything that gets in the way, like bad pitch or like
distracting.
Yeah, things that are distracting. Those are bad things. But I would just tell people it's not so much about what you look like, sound like. It's about you getting out of the way and letting God touch his people.
Yeah.
So
Do you feel like there was a moment where you came to that realization as a young worship leader where you went home on a Sunday and you were like, I don't feel like that hit the mark. And you just knew like, I need to shift how I do this. What sparked that for you?
It definitely grew. It grew in me a knowledge. And I think I wish I could tell every young worship leader to skip all of the years and years that I had where I was trying to get my craft just right. And just when I started realizing how hungry people were for God and that they really weren't there to watch me, that they were there to meet with God and they wanted to express a song together. And I just started thinking more like a shepherd and less like a performer. I have a sermon that I preach from showman to shepherd. It's a journey. It's a journey that every young worship leader has to take, from a showman to a shepherd. And once you become a shepherd, you realize, like, I'm just leading the flock, God's flock, to still waters. And that's the whole purpose of me being here. And it liberates you. Somebody told me one time I had a sore throat and I could barely talk. And they said, "Are you still leading worship?" Because there was nobody else to lead worship. And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "You're not scared of what you're going to sound like?" I'm like, "No, it really doesn't matter. I could just get up there and say, 'Hey, everybody, sing Amazing Grace.' Start right here. Oh, man." And they would all start singing, and they would probably think it was the best worship they ever had in their life.
Great point.
So it really doesn't matter about you as much as you think it does, you know? So that's what I would tell young worshipers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember I have similar experience where I would be so critical of myself coming off. That was bad. You sounded terrible. You didn't remember the lyrics, which is a problem for every worship leader. But like the whole thought that, did people engage with God? Like, was God present? Were his praises on their mouth? Like, that's the win. Moving the goal of what worship time actually looked like.
Absolutely. So worship has changed from decade to decade.
Right.
When did you start leading worship?
I started leading worship probably I would say 2006.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your go-to song?
Oh, man. Our God is an awesome God.
Okay.
Not a bad one,
Did
right?
you do the verse? When he rose up his
It has
sleeves,
verses?
he wasn't putting on the Ritz.
Oh, no. I didn't even know there was verses.
Man, he's got thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fist. Our God is an awesome God. Well, the Lord, he wasn't joking when he kicked him out of Eden. There was for no reason why he shed his blood. His return is very soon, so you better be believing that our God is an awesome God. Yeah, you know.
Had no clue that song had verses. That's a first.
Yeah. I never sang them, but all right, so if you had a number two.
Oh, man. Number two.
Picking up the guitar, and here you go.
I'm going into it right now.
Yep.
Coming back to the heart of worship.
Oh, when the music fades, Matt Redman.
Yeah.
Cool.
What's that for you?
Well, I started
I know what it
worship
is. I
in
could
the
guess
90s,
it for you.
man. So I was back when Brownsville Revival was going on. Vineyard music was happening. So some of my favorite go-to worship songs were "I Need You More Than Yesterday," and then Delirious. "What a friend we found, closer than a brother." You know, that one where it says the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
I sang that one a lot. I sang Heart of Worship. And then in the early 2000s, obviously all the Hillsong stuff, Shout to the Lord.
Oh, classic.
Daryl Evans, Trading My Sorrows. Your love is extravagant. So
Trading My Sorrows. That's a good
but
one.
I love to write music too.
Yeah.
And so I used to sing a lot of songs that I wrote.
So let me ask you about that, because Bethany's such a worshiping church. I remember almost a decade ago, first time I led worship at Bethany, and immediately I knew I was at Oral Roberts University. I knew there was something so different about Bethany. And when you had asked me, even after that time, the first time I was here, I said, there's just something so different. Like, the people really worship the Lord here. What would you say has contributed to that worship culture? Is it our own music that we wrote, that we got to put language to worship for our people? Or what do you think has really inspired that for our church?
Wow. You know, I think if you go to a church where there's no revelation of worship, the worship is going to be short.
Yeah, it's
every
true.
time. And sometimes they may not even sing Christian songs. It may just be, mainstream music. And it depends on people's revelation of worship. The more they understand, the more they participate. Nobody tithed until they realized this was something God wanted them to do.
Right.
Nobody honored the Sabbath till they realized this was a priority. Worship is like that. You read the Psalms and it says, lift up your hands. You hear somebody say to kneel or bow in the presence of God. And so when you hear teaching on it, you have revelation on it.
Yeah.
And I think Bethany has always tried to prioritize teaching on worship, the power of praise to break chains in your life, the power of worship to draw the presence of God close to you. And the more people understand, the more they participate. And I also feel like it has something to do with what we tapped into at the beginning of this conversation, which is setting it up on a tee. Are the songs singable? Are they in keys that people can sing in? Are the lyrics in front of them where they can participate? I love it when worship services are corporate, not performance. There's always a place for song ministry where you're ministering to somebody, but I love being in a group of people where we're all singing to God. So maybe those are some of the contributing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, guys, it's been awesome having you participate in this. John, it's been great having you on the program. I love talking about worship. Maybe next time we'll dive into songwriting and talk about the essence of songwriting and what we're looking for in that. But thank you guys so much for joining. Make sure you subscribe. It's important that you subscribe so you get alerted next time it comes up, and we will see you next week.